Hi guys, I've got a few minutes here. I just dropped Devin and Dylan off. We had a nice night at Barnes & Noble, and then we went to Panera and had dinner, and then we went to visit Papa at the Antique Mall, and I took them by what might be my new home someday. Who knows? And I'm back, and I thought, what? I've got a few minutes, so let's read a little bit to the big kids tonight and do our angel tree. Yeah, it's got ice on her knee here, so please forgive the sounds. Let's see, we've got 3 wishes that have come true now, right? Luke, Joe, not Luke, Lucy for Valentine, Joe for his mother, and Max for a home for his family. And we are on chapter 15, 12 days until Christmas. The others were standing in front of the angel tree when Max arrived the next morning. He had overslept and barely had time to wolf down some toast before throwing on his jacket and heading for the meeting. Cammie was chatting with Joe and Lucy, but she broke off when she saw Max approach. Max braced himself for the inevitable scolding that he knew was coming. Cammie did not tolerate lateness, but to his surprise, Cammie just smiled sweetly and greeted him with great cheer. Max was instantly suspicious. "What's going on?" he asked. Cammie's eyes widened and an ominous feeling began building in Max's gut. "Nothing. I'm just glad you're here," she said, her voice way too sugary. "Now we can get started." Max decided not to press the issue, but his guard was up. He greeted Lucy and then pointedly turned his back on Joe, who was shivering pathetically in his thin jacket. "So what's the plan?" he asked. "Today we start investigating our possible suspects. I mean GBs," Cammie said. "That's great benefactors." "Excellent," Max said, rubbing his hands together. He was ready to go under cover. "I was thinking we should come up with reasons to visit everyone on our list," Cammie said. "Then we worked the conversation around to the angel tree and looked for clues, any change in expression, or a slip-up where they know more than they should." It sounded great to Max, but Lucy was biting her lip. "I'm not sure I can really do that," she said hesitantly, "and I don't know how to get to anyone's house on my own. I can go back for Valentine, but I should probably let her rest up before school." "No problem," Cammie said quickly. "I was already thinking that you and I could go together. I'll look for visual clues, and you can listen for clues, or see if you can sniff any out." Cammie smiled at her joke, but Lucy's brow was tightly knit and the corners of her mouth turned down. "I don't know. Maybe I should just sit this part out," she said, so quietly Max could barely hear her over the sound of cars driving on the streets around the square. "Now don't be silly," Cammie said, sounding distressed. "We need you." "Changes in voice pattern can indicate a lie," Max said. "You can be listening for that. And 2 people are more likely to pick up on subtle clues," Cammie said, tossing Max a grateful look. "Like one person does the talking, and the other keeps an ear out for anything unusual." "Okay," Lucy said, but her shoulders were sagging. Joe cleared his throat. "I'm not sure how much I can help," he said. Max turned just enough to see Joe scraping a line in the snow with the toe of his boot. "I don't know anyone on the list, and I don't know what I'd say to them." "You could try punching them," Max muttered. Joe lifted his head and gave Max a murderous look. Max glared back. "That's why you'll go with Max," Cammie said sweetly. Max whipped his head around. Was she out of her mind? What? No way. "No," Joe echoed firmly. Cammie put a hand on her hip. "It makes the most sense," she said. "Like you said, Joe doesn't know anyone, and Max, you know everyone. You can introduce Joe, and then he can be on the lookout for clues while you get the conversation going. Not gonna happen, Max said, and he meant it. But as he folded his arms over his chest, he could see that Cammy was going to be just as stubborn. She lifted her chin. It makes the most sense, she said, slowly, like she was talking to a baby. Max glared at Cammy. Clearly this had been her plan all along. Well, too bad. No way were Max and Joe going to spend the day together. If you really think it's the best way to get the job done, I'll do it, Joe said. Max whipped around, his eyes blazing. What was wrong with Joe? Max knew Joe hated the idea as much as he did. But Joe didn't even bother looking at Max. His shoulders slumped and he looked resigned, like the total and complete wimp he was. Cammy gave Max a smug smile. Max threw up his arms, knowing defeat when it came his way. Fine, whatever, he said. Great, Cammy said in her regular voice, the sugar gone now that she'd gotten her way. She whipped out her phone. I made a list of possible GBs. Of course she had. Max leaned in so he could see the screen. Mr. Pink, the Von Wolfs, Alma Sanchez, and the Barristers. I was thinking that Lucy and I could go see Miss Sanchez, and you guys can visit the Barristers, Cammy continued. Max knew she was trying to make up for pairing him with Joe by suggesting they follow up on Max's favorite theory, but it was going to take a lot more than that for Max to forgive Cammy. Remember to see if the Barristers have a lot of books to go with the bookmark. There was no guilt in Cammy's voice, and she had the gall to smile at them before she and Lucy headed off. There was a long moment of silence after the girls left. So where are we going? Joe asked lifelessly. Clearly he hated the thought of spending time with Max. Max decided that just because they had to spend time together didn't mean they had to actually speak. So instead of answering, he just headed off, leaving the square and heading down Church Street. Joe followed. They walked 4 blocks, then turned on Market Street. Max glanced back, half hoping Joe had decided to go home, but he was still there, visibly shaking and shivering. Max realized that Joe's coat was way, way too thin for the bitter winters of Pine River. Joe's family probably didn't have much money for a new coat, and Max was almost considering mentioning the church thrift shop, where his family got winter coats for him and Fiona every year. This year Max had gotten a nearly new Patagonia down jacket that was probably warm enough for camping out in the Himalayas. But before he could say anything, Joe caught his gaze and frowned. Problem? He asked in his obnoxious way. Max rolled his eyes and said nothing, just picked up his pace so they'd get this over with faster. What will we do when we get there? Joe asked a few minutes later. Max was tempted to keep on ignoring him, but realized he needed to take charge of things or Joe would probably do something to mess the whole thing up. If they're home, we try to get them to talk, he said. And if not, we'll take a quick look around, do some searching in their yard, and peek in the windows. That sounds illegal, Joe said, sounding hesitant. You scared? Max taunted. Joe glared, but he rose to the bait like Max knew he would. Fine, he muttered. Joe glared, but he rose to the bait. The barrister's house was on the corner of Market and Montgomery Streets, the only house on the block with a fence protecting the property. Their house was large and kind of spooky. Max thought it was painted a somber gray with black trim, and the path hadn't been shoveled. The boys walked up the icy front steps and knocked. We'll do it with sound effects. After a minute passed, Max knocked again. No one's here, he said when no one answered. He had to admit he was hoping for this. Getting either of the quiet barristers to talk would be hard, so spying was really their best bet. He peered into the window next to the door. He could see an entryway with a set of shelves for shoes, and a closed door, probably a closet. Joe hesitated, then glanced in. "Nothing here," he said. "Maybe we should leave." "Let's go around back," Joe said, ignoring Joe's annoying remark. Max said, ignoring Joe's annoying remark. They were going undercover, and Max was pumped up. "What about our footprints?" Joe asked. "They'll know someone was here." "But they won't know who," Max said cheerfully. He pulled his hat down low over his eyes and wrapped his scarf around his face so that no one passing by could see him. Then he led the way around the house. The first window they peeked through showed a kitchen, full of the usual kitchen things. The dining room next door held a big wooden table, but had only 2 chairs. "I guess they don't have much company," Max said. Joe shrugged, and Max vowed not to talk to him again. The next room was the living room, with a sagging sofa and chair set arranged around the fireplace. There was something slightly off about it, but it took Max a minute to realize what it was. "You know what's weird?" he asked, breaking his vow after only 2 minutes. He couldn't help it, though, not when he was in a spy mood and uncovering so much. "They don't have any pictures up." Joe's eyebrows scrunched. "I guess that's weird. They don't have any books either," he said. Max was irritated. Joe had remembered to look out for that. "Maybe they have books in another room," he said, stopping away from the window and creeping around the corner of the house. There was only one more set of windows. The little room at the end of the house was darker than the others, and it took Max's eyes a moment to adjust before he could make anything out. And when he did, none of it made sense. There was a framed photo of a young soldier, posed in a fancy army uniform. Next to the picture was a set of dog tags, a stack of letters, and a velvet box. The rest of the room was empty. Max started to say something about how strange it was when Joe, who had come up a moment later, gasped and stepped back from the window like something had bitten him. "What's wrong?" Max asked. Joe shook his head. He headed for the street, his jaw hard and his shoulders set. Max followed, confused but annoyed. "Do you know what that creepy room is?" he asked as he caught up to Joe. "It's not creepy," Joe snapped in a snotty way that drove Max crazy. "Yeah, it is. Who has a room for one picture?" Max said. Joe turned to him, eyes blazing. "You're an idiot," he said. "At least I have friends and people actually like me," Max said, clenching his teeth and getting ready for a fight. Joe glared a moment longer, then turned and started walking. "I'm going home," he said. Max knew he should just let Joe go. His gut was boiling in a way that was dangerous, that let him know if he kept going he was going to get in trouble. But he couldn't just turn away, not this time. "That's right," Max jeered. "Run home to your mama." Joe stopped in his tracks and turned. "You don't talk about my mom," he said, his voice hard and low. "Not ever." "Why is she—" Max began, but then Joe moved toward him, a fist cocking back. It wasn't the threat of being punched that shut Max up. It was the fact that Joe's eyes were full of tears. "The room was a shrine for a fallen soldier," Joe said in a shaky voice. "A hero who died for his country. A hero like my mom." "Wait, your mom's a soldier?" Max asked, shocked. Joe nodded. "She's a Marine," he said. "She's in the Middle East helping out with the peace initiative." Max remembered what he had said way back in September that made Joe haul off and punch him. It was about Joe's mom, a your mama joke. The kind the guys on the flag football team told all the time, and now finally Max got it. Joe's sullen silence, the way he kept to himself. He was worrying about his mom, who was far away and in constant danger. And that was the reason he had punched Max. He was defending his mom, who was out defending their country. Max had just assumed Joe was a jerk, when in fact Cammie was right. Joe did have a story, and the only jerk in that story, the real story, was Max. Guilt began to seep into him, a thick fog that made him feel about 3 inches tall. "I'm sorry," he said. "That my mom is in the armed forces?" Joe asked, defensively, because, "No, for what I said just now," Max interrupted, "and for the joke I made in September." He scuffed his toe in the snow. "You're right. Your mom is a hero, and if she was here, I want to thank her for what she's doing." Joe shrugged, and for a second Max felt that rush of irritation, that Joe was just ignoring him again. But then he realized that Joe was swallowing hard. A cold wind swirled around them, and Max saw that Joe was shivering. "Let's go," he said, turning back toward town. "Where?" Joe asked, his eyes narrowing. "Do you have $10 on you?" Max asked, ignoring Joe's question. Yeah," Joe said. Are you planning to blackmail me?" Max laughed and shook his head. "We're going to the church thrift shop to get you a decent coat." "My coat is fine," Joe said. Max gave him a sharp look. "Do I really look like an idiot to you?" he said. "You're miserable because that coat is useless in a real winter, and I know you don't think you're too good to get a coat where I get mine every year." There was a long silence. Joe looked at Max, then off into the distance, then back at Max. "Okay," he said finally, "we can do that." Max gave a firm nod and started back toward town. "And Max?" He turned. "Thanks," Joe said. Let's see what we got here. We'll do one more chapter. Chapter 16, 12 days until Christmas. "This place is huge," Cammie said to Lucy as they walked up the icy path to Alma Sanchez's house. "I think she must have 25 rooms just for her and her cat." "I bet the cat likes having the room to run around," Lucy said, trying to keep her voice light to hide how tired she was feeling. The walk to Miss Sanchez's house wasn't more than a mile from Lucy's house, but tromping through the fresh snow was taxing, especially since sometimes there were ice patches or uneven sections of the sidewalk that were easy to trip on. Plus there was the stress of knowing she was slowing Cammie down. Right about now, Lucy was really missing Valentine. Cammie laughed as she led them up the steps. Lucy snagged the toe of her boot on the first one. It was always hard to gauge how high steps were, but Cammie had her arm, and she steadied herself. Cammie shifted slightly to ring the bell, which Lucy heard chime inside the home. A minute later, the door flew open. "Cammie, Lucy, come in," Miss Sanchez said. Cammie guided Lucy into a warm room that smelled of butter cookies and pine needles. If the house was as big as Cammie claimed, Lucy imagined that the Christmas tree must be spectacular. "Perfect timing," Miss Sanchez said. "I'm testing a Christmas cookie recipe. You'll have to try some and tell me what you think." "If you insist," Cammie said in her usual friendly way. "Thanks," Lucy added. "You girls make yourself at home and I'll be right back with the cookies." "Here's the sofa," Cammie said, carefully backing Lucy up so that her calves rested against the seat. "And just so you know, this whole room is lined with bookcases. She's definitely a big reader." So the bookmark could belong to her, Lucy said, sinking down on the soft cushions. Yes, she fits a lot of the profile. She's a reader. She has money and time, Cammy said in a low voice. Plus, she's generous, inviting us in without even asking why we're here, Lucy added. I know, Cammy agreed. She reminds me of my grandma, always welcoming. Lucy noticed a note of sadness in Cammy's voice and wondered if she should ask about it. But then she heard footsteps coming down the hall toward them, and a moment later Miss Sanchez was back, the smell of cookies even more powerful. Lucy, here's your plate, Miss Sanchez said, handing it to Lucy and making sure she held it securely before she let go. How's that dog of yours? At this, Lucy smiled, remembering how kind Miss Sanchez had been on that street that day. She's great, thanks, Lucy said. Lucy waited until she heard Cammy crunching into her cookie. Then she felt for hers. It was in the shape of a candy cane and studded with rough sugar sprinkles. Lucy took a bite. The luscious, buttery cookie, just the right amount of sweet. Delicious, she said when she had swallowed. Cammy agreed. These are fantastic. Thank you, Miss Sanchez said, sounding pleased. Oh, are either of you allergic to cats? I think Naomi is coming in to pay a visit. Lucy shook her head, and a moment later, she heard a soft thump as the cat jumped up on the sofa and came over to sniff Lucy's hand, her whiskers soft against Lucy's skin. Lucy let Naomi sniff her for a moment, then began to pet her. Naomi kneaded her paws into the sofa and started to purr. She likes you, Miss Sanchez said. I like her too, Lucy said. She's beautiful, Cammy said, reaching over to pet Naomi as well. Then Lucy felt Cammy shift slightly on the sofa and knew she was about to bring up the excuse they'd planned for knocking on Miss Sanchez's door in the first place. So we came by because we know you lead the town choir Christmas caroling on December 21st, and I had kind of a special request for when you come by our place. My grandmother's favorite carol is Go Tell It on the Mountain, and I was wondering if you guys could sing it for her. I'd be happy to, Miss Sanchez said, and how thoughtful of you to think of it, Lucy. I'm sorry. And how thoughtful of you to think of it. Lucy heard her pick up another cookie. Well, she does a lot for me, Cammy said, and she just loves everything about Christmas in Pine River. Don't we all, Miss Sanchez said. Now it was Lucy's turn, and she sat up a little straighter, accidentally startling the cat. I love the Christmas gala. She tried to make her rehearsed lines sound natural, but she felt like her voice was coming out stiff. Every year the concert is just amazing. Totally amazing. She was glad Max was not here to see her totally spy fail. We'll all be looking forward to your part in that, Miss Sanchez said to Cammy. Lucy was surprised when Cammy said nothing, but she pressed on with the script. And of course, there's the angel tree, she said, like it had just in that moment occurred to her. Yes, it's already granted some pretty incredible wishes, Cammy said. Like the new house for the Callahans, Miss Sanchez said. Ed Pink was telling me about it. Wow, imagine all the work it would take to set up such a thing. Of course, whoever was behind the tree would pretend to be impressed by it to hide his or her tracks. Lucy listened intently for any inflections that might indicate Miss Sanchez was hiding something. But either Miss Sanchez wasn't the great benefactor, or she was a much better actor than Lucy. The person behind the tree is truly an angel, Miss Sanchez went on passionately, a maker of miracles. Lucy heard Cammy slump slightly next to her and had to admit that this wasn't sounding good. Yes, GB would cover the truth, but he or she probably wouldn't go around boasting about the work the tree did. We're lucky to live in a town with a person who would create such a special and unique tradition, Miss Sanchez said. It's a blessing. Lucy sank back deeper into the sofa cushions. They could probably cross Miss Sanchez off the list of possible GBs. Girls, is everything okay? Miss Sanchez asked. Lucy realized she had let her face fall into a frown. She was definitely not good at hiding her true feelings. No, it's just we're kind of on a mission to find out who's behind the angel tree, Cammy said. Isn't the whole point of the angel tree that the identity of the organizer remains a secret? Miss Sanchez asked. Yes, Cammy said, but whoever is behind the tree, whoops, just a minute. Whoever is behind the tree has been doing it for so many years and has never been thanked. We wanted to change that. There was a tiny rustle that was either Miss Sanchez shaking her head or nodding. Sometimes not being able to see was frustrating. You know, I like that idea, Miss Sanchez said. The person bringing so much joy to our town should get some joy coming back her way. So she had been nodding. You think it's a woman? Miss Sanchez laughed. You're quite the detective. Well, I'm not sure. But every so often when I help out with a bigger wish, I get a handwritten note, and the written note looks like a woman's writing. Do you have a note? Cammy asked. I do, Miss Sanchez said. Lucy could hear the smile in her voice as she stood up and opened a drawer in a desk or table at the far side of the room. Here you go, she said. Walking back and handing it to Cammy. Cammy cleared her throat. Okay, this is what it says. Please give your donated ornaments to Ed Pink on Saturday afternoon. Not a lot to get from that, I don't think, Miss Sanchez said. No, but the writing is very curly, Cammy said, clearly trying to stay positive. It kind of looks like my grandma's. Miss Sanchez laughed. That would be quite the mystery to uncover, your own grandmother being the one behind the angel tree. Cammy laughed. She would totally do something like that, but there's no way she could keep it a secret from me. Her voice had a little bit of bounce back, but Lucy could tell she was still discouraged that Miss Sanchez was not GB, and Lucy had to admit she felt the same. She rubbed Naomi's head, feeling slightly confronted by the cat's steady purr. We should probably get going, Cammy said, her coat brushing against the sofa as she stood. They thanked Miss Sanchez for the cookies, gave Naomi one last pat, and began the trip back to town. Ruling people out is an important part of the process, Cammy said. Cammy knew well that she could tell that the upbeat adult tone covered her disappointment. It is, Lucy agreed staunchly. And what's good is that we found out so fast that it's not Miss Sanchez, that we're not wasting time on a false lead. Plus, the note is a great clue. Good points, Cammy said, a bit more cheerful. It really did look like a woman's writing, so we can include that on our list of traits. A car drove past slowly, and the driver honked. It's Miss Clayton, Cammy said, waving at one of the owners of the Hobby Horse, a craft store in town. Lucy waved too. That reminds me, actually. I wanted to get some yarn from my grandma. She's crocheting a scarf for my cousin Willa. Lucy heard a note of tension when Cammy said her cousin's name. And she needs more gold. Would you mind if we stopped off at the Hobby Horse before I take you home? No, that's fine, Lucy said. She would have preferred to go straight home and rest, but of course she was happy to make the stop for Cammy. If she had more energy, she'd get some yarn for the sweater she was knitting her mom for Christmas, but right now the thought of a long conversation about getting just the right shade of green made her want to take a nap. A few minutes later, they were back on Main Street, and Cammy was opening the door to the Hobby Horse, which smelled of lavender and wool. Do you mind if I run in and get the yarn, Cammy asked. Sure, I'll just wait here, Lucy said. The store was crowded with voices and smells, and Lucy felt a headache tapping at her temples. She stepped backward and felt her hip brush against something that fell to the floor with a series of loud crashes. Oh, someone gave out a small cry, and a number of people gasped. Lucy's whole body clenched up as she waited to hear what had happened, what she had done. Don't worry, it's fine. It was Miss Clayton, still smelling like the crisp outside air. Just be careful you don't hurt yourself, Lucy. Lucy didn't know what she meant or how exactly she was supposed to protect herself. She felt naked and helpless like a baby, unable to do the smallest thing. It did not help when Cammy came up sounding panicked. Lucy, I'm so sorry I left you so close to that display, Cammy said, grabbing onto Lucy's arm and walking her away from whatever mess she had created. I wasn't even thinking about how delicate it was and how easy it would be to knock into it. What was it? Lucy asked, feeling close to tears. Oh, some crystal figurines and a couple of glass vases. And they're all broken? Lucy asked, shame flooding her. I'm not sure. Of course she didn't want to be explaining every little detail to Lucy, when she was probably angry at her for being so careless. I'm so sorry, Lucy said. But her words were lost in the sounds of a vacuum turning on, and the clinky whoosh of shards of glass and crystal being sucked up. Cammy apologized to Miss Clayton about 1,000 times, which only made Lucy feel worse. After all, it wasn't Cammy's fault that Lucy was a klutz. Finally, Cammy took Lucy's arm and walked them out into the icy air that cooled Lucy's hot face. I'm really sorry, Lucy said as Cammy led her home. Don't worry, it wasn't your fault, Cammy said, but she sounded distant. It was, actually, Lucy said, and I'm sorry you didn't get the yarn either. Really, Lucy, it's fine, Cammy said. Lucy thought she detected a note of impatience in Cammy's voice and decided to let it drop, even though the whole thing felt like a lump of coal in her belly. They walked the rest of the way to Lucy's in silence. Once she was up in her room, Lucy lay down in her bed. She had a message from Anya, but she didn't feel like calling her friend back now. She wasn't in the mood to talk. At least, not to talk to any one person. Instead, she rested her cheek against Valentine's soft fur. It was a mistake for me to go, she told the dog, whose tail thumped on the floor when she heard Lucy's voice. I made everything harder, just like I knew I would. She rubbed Valentine's ears and was rewarded with a lick on her hand. Lucy was thankful that Valentine would be back in school with her on Monday, and still endlessly grateful to the person behind the angel tree who had saved her dog's life, which was the only reason she was going to go to the meetings after school. But from here on out, no matter how bad it made her feel, she was going to be firm. No more outings where she could or would make a mess of things. Oh, I feel so bad for her. Don't you? I feel so bad for her. Okay, chapter 17, 11 days until Christmas. And we still have about 11 chapters left, but they're short. So, I have some messages to return. I heard dinging, and I have a phone call to return. I heard ringing, and I probably may not be here tomorrow night. I'm not sure, but I think we're going to go out to dinner to Kansai with the kids, and I'm looking forward to that. All of us, the kids, the grandkids. That's fun. So, if I don't get back tomorrow night, I wish you all a very happy New Year, happy 2017, and I hope it's a great one for you and a great one for me and all of our friends and family. And I love you guys, you know that, and you're part of my heart. Good night.